Hello, everyone, and welcome to 5 Ways of Improving Your Learning Culture and Experience today. My name is Jesse Novak, and I will be presenting today. I want to thank Clara and ATD for putting all of this together. So with that, thank you everyone for joining and from all over the world, it looks like. It's very exciting. And let's get this show started. All right, so today we're going to be talking about 5 ways to improve your learning culture and experience and really plan for this. What are these first steps that you have to take? So the first part of this is really understanding what your learning culture is. Have you defined it? Have you looked at, what you have today, what that is made up of? A learning culture is a big part of your organization and can have a huge impact on success. So what can we do to help? This is the first question that you have to ask yourself. What can you do to help improve your learning culture, and how can your learning culture improve your organization? So let's talk about 5 ways that we can improve our learning cultures. First one is to take the time to clearly define what your learning culture is so that you're aware of how it's interacting within your organization and the effect that the desired effect that you're trying to achieve. Get buy-in from your stakeholders. Make sure that your leadership is on board with what you're trying to accomplish. Establish clear channels of communication and feedback. Make sure that both your stakeholders and the employees in your organization, your learners, all understand what's going on, and there's an easy mechanism in place for both communication to go out to these different groups and the information that they need, as well as to be able to collect feedback in so that you can understand what's going on from their perspective as well. Recognition and reward. We as human beings all feel better about ourselves when we're recognized for the level of effort that we put in. That a lot of times people feel like certain things are expected, and in the business world, many times they are, but still we have an opportunity here to improve motivation and engagement, even for those things that might be required, through recognizing the effort that they're doing, as well as figuring out ways that we can reward them. And then finally, creating a strong learning experience for your organization. And we'll go into detail of what I mean by that. But the learning experience is everything that you do before people start taking training. And that experience of taking the training and of interacting within the culture in your organization is what that is. And there's a lot of things that you can do to help and improve that. All right, so why should we do this? So I'm going to quote Josh Bersin here. He's been in the industry for years, and he makes a very valuable point here. So a learning culture is a very business relevant and not at all academic piece of a culture. And what he says here, I'm not going to quote it verbatim, is that what this allows for is for you to quickly fix problems. It allows you to innovate potentially in a disruptive industry and be able to stay with pace with your competitors or even outpace them. And really, in many senses, it can be the lifeblood of your organization. It literally could mean the life and death of your organization. There are organizations that were unable to either innovate or fix problems that are no longer around today. All right, so first thing, defining your culture. Now, I really like this quote. In the game of life, you can choose to play or play badly. You cannot not play. And what that means to me, and what that means to your learning culture, is that no matter what you do, you have a learning culture. So you can choose to ignore it or not play, but you can't not have a learning culture. So the best thing you can do here is to make sure that you are taking the best advantage of this that you can. Understanding your learning culture, what goals that you have, how do they align to your organization? That's going to impact your culture. How do you want to change it? Do you want to completely disrupt what you have? Do you want to evolve it quickly or do you want to evolve it slowly? So understanding what your plan's going to be. Understanding your industry and your organization's needs. So this is going to come from as much of talking to your leadership as talking to your learners or employees. Are you a compliance-driven organization? Are you in an industry that is quickly innovating and your industry is heavily disruptive? So do you need to regularly, constantly develop your employees and make sure that they have the best information available to them? Make sure that you have the support of your leadership. Make sure that you've talked to them. Make sure that you plan and make sure that what your culture is doing aligns to the culture inside of your organization and fits in a way that is going to further the goals of the organization and the people that are using it. Do you know what your learner experience is like? And what I mean by that is, we are outside of the learning experience in some ways. You're creating the training, you're setting up the tools, you're administering them, you're communicating back and forth with your stakeholders regularly. But are you communicating back and forth with your learners? Do you understand the challenges they're facing? Do you understand what it's like to take those courses? So getting that feedback is going to be very important. And then finally, have you found ways to recognize efforts for their learner? It's found that recognition and reward, can improve engagement. And at the end of the day, that's going to be one of the biggest things that's going to impact your culture. Do you have the tools and mechanisms in place that are going to make achieving your initiatives and your goals as easy as possible, to remove any obstacles and keep frustration as low as possible, so that you can have the highest levels of engagement from your learners? So a big part of this is to create a plan. Understanding where your learning culture is today and where you want to take it. Because you first, as your team, you and your team have to understand what it is that you want to do to be able to communicate that to your stakeholders and be able to get buy-in. So are you trying to personally develop your employees? Are you giving them the options of what they want to learn? Are you do you need them to be better at problem solving, innovation, idea sharing? Are you going to provide them mentoring and coaching? This is a big question in a culture. And you can have that, or you can have a compliance driven organization where you have strong needs due to regulation, that you must be safe, you must be secure. So understanding those two. And very often, it's not either or. Very often, it's a blend of both of these. Yeah, Alan says getting leadership support can be a real challenge sometimes. This is true. And this is why I'm suggesting that you create a plan. Because when you go in to talk to them, there is going to be the opportunity to do a few things first. So let's take a look at that. And well, we'll get into getting buy-in just after this. The last part about building your culture I want to talk about is just another example from Deloitte, where it says that organizations that have strong learning cultures tend to have higher engagement and retention. They also tend to have more creativity, better processes, products, and more profitability. So this is the why of what we're doing here. All right, so we jumped ahead in the discussion pod of what I'm talking about, but let's talk about getting buy-in. So for a lot of people, this can feel like a daunting task. Most of us are not salespeople or have not been salespeople, and really getting buy-in is a negotiation. I mean, it is selling yourself and your ideas inside of your organization. So there are some things that you can do to make this easier. Create a business plan. This is in essence a business. You're looking for investment from your organization to carry out this plan. So you have to be able to show what you're doing, why you're doing it, how it supports your overall company culture and initiatives, so that you can show an investment or a return on their investment, whether that be saving them money through reducing liability or improving innovation and improving performance so that they see an increase in their bottom line. But either way, I mean, this is what it comes down to. So be prepared to discuss this and have a plan in place. Now, I also like this quote. I like quotes, but victory favors the prepared. So before you even begin the conversations, make sure that you're prepared. All right, so let's say that you've now defined your culture, whether it's a purely developmental culture that's more fun and loose and free and they get to choose, or it's more compliance driven, or like I said, it is more commonly a blend of the two. We have some things that are compliance based and some things that are more free form and developmental based, around development plans and career paths and things like that. So this is the discussion right here that's going on in the discussion pod. And thank you, Alan, for chipping in here. Do you know who your stakeholders are? Do you know which groups in your organization have the biggest needs? Find champions. There's a lot of times where within your organization, different groups, whether it's sales or engineering, whoever it might be, they have their own initiatives that they have to achieve. And many times they have more budget and they can spend that where they want to be able to spend it. So this is one of those things where you can go out and talk to, all these different groups, find out who is going to be in consideration for making these calls and potentially develop internal champions. Set milestones. So you want to make sure that this discussion, once you've started, doesn't go on indefinitely. You want to make sure that once the discussion starts, that you have a date by which you'd like to get things going so that you can have an impact, the desired impact on the organization and the goals that you're trying to have an impact on. Richard Jenkins says, discovery, discovery, discovery. I agree with that wholeheartedly. Understanding what the needs are of your organization and the different groups and how you can impact that is going to be a big part of whether or not you're successful. Finally, once you've started the conversation, once you're more further way through it, you've got your champions, you've got people involved and on board, get a commitment of a date that you're either going to get the investment you need, whether that's headcount, dollars, whatever it is, but get a commitment and a date by which you're going to start. And then finally, a big part of this is not just your stakeholders, not just your management level and C-level employees. You're going to want to talk to your learners because you can't be successful without them. Make sure that they know that change is coming. People find comfort in familiarity. So when something changes, especially if it seemingly changes abruptly, people tend to get aggravated. So as much as you can, it's very effective to make sure to begin that conversation earlier, let them know that change is coming, let them know why, give them, and we'll talk about communication and feedback in a few minutes as well, but give them the opportunity to provide you feedback. This might be really valuable as a way to collect information in helping to design and develop and define your learning culture. So, Make sure that you have buy-in from your learners as well as much as possible. So what are their options? And what I mean by this is when you go in to talk to your stakeholders, don't go in with one plan. Give them some options. Maybe it's based on investment, it changes the timeline in which you can do certain things, or based on investment, it changes how much impact you can have. So it's just go in and give them some different ways that you're comfortable with that they can look at this so that they can find something that feels comfortable for them as well. So Kate asks, what about defining the business goals are for learning? For example, are you trying to reduce onboarding time or cost? Well, ultimately, yes. That it's the question, right? What is all of your training for? Are you trying to reduce training time or cost, like you said? Are you trying to prepare a sales organization for rolling out a new product? Uh, that is all the business plan. That is, under making sure that you understand the business goals and how they're aligned to the learning that you're also putting out there. Well, Daniel, don't you believe that training needs align to operation and financial needs? I mean, if you look at it, that's mostly what training is for. Not all of it. Some of it is for developing employees, but even then, developing your employees so that they, uh, impacts retention, it impacts their ability to learn and do new innovative things. All of this ultimately leads to the bottom line of the company. I mean, retention is a huge cost. Absolutely. Sometimes it is based on technology or management style, and that's part of understanding your entire company culture and how your learning culture can fit inside of that. Well, Eileen asks, how do you handle learners that say they don't need training or don't waste my time? Um, I think that's part of communication as well, and we're going to talk about that in a bit. So I'll cover that in just a little while. So back to what I was talking about as far as getting buy-in. This is why you've prepared. This is why you've developed champions. You're at the point where you're finally negotiating and selling your idea and getting ready to move forward. And once you have a commitment, hit the ground running and start working on it right away. All right, so uh, back to the question about um, what do you do when a learner says that they don't need training or they don't need to do this? I mean, that's part of your culture. That's part of the challenges that you're going to have to change. So this is why feedback and communication are important. So communication should explain to these learners ahead of time before they start taking these courses, and they should understand the impact of what they're doing, the value of it towards the entire organization. I feel very strongly that the reason that a learner would say that is that they don't understand the impact of the training on the organization itself. So if it's a safety training or a security training or a sexual harassment training, let's say, these are all typically more compliance related. You know, let them understand the impact of what that can do to an organization. You can show them numbers that actually would outline not necessarily, your own organization's numbers, but more general ones, the impact of liability on those things so that they understand that making sure that the organization itself is protected. And why is that important? Because at the end of the day, the more liability an organization has or the more money that goes out that direction, the uh, the less money there is for new headcount or for raises, promotions, things like that. So many times it's about personalizing it for them, letting them understand how it impacts them. So you're also going to want to get feedback from them. And this is before and this is before and after the process, the culture is defined and everything is up and running and going. Getting constant feedback, understanding how the experience is impacting your learners is going to be a big part of your success. So communication. You're going to want to communicate the value of your learning program to your stakeholders, and that's your business plan. That's building this out. They should understand this, but you're going to want to continue to do this through the whole process. So make sure that the tools that you use have easy reporting that you can take advantage of so that they can clearly see at any time. You can allow them access or you can provide them reports, but they can see that, what is happening. And then you can take that data and you can align that data to other organizational data and begin to paint a picture of how that's providing a return on investment. So you're also going to want to make sure you continue to communicate the value of this program to your learners. And this goes back to what I was talking about earlier, the question that came up. If they understand the value to themselves, they understand the value to their organization, most people, not all, but most, if they understand how it is that it's being done, and we'll talk about recognition and reward in a minute as well, and they are recognized for it, and there's some level of appreciation shown. It doesn't even have to be that significant, but even the smallest amount could be significant to the individual. And what I meant is that it doesn't have to be large or grandiose, but it is significant. Melissa says, overheard from a leader, I don't get recognized for developing my people if leaders don't put forth the effort. This mindset bleeds into the individual contributors. That's absolutely true. There's another saying, poisoning the well. If leaders don't buy in, if your line managers or your VPs, or if you don't have buy-in from them and they don't understand how this is impacting, they're not their direct reports are also going to be impacted by that negativity. So, and it's going to be like a dance. It's not going to be a one-time thing. There's going to be give and take, and there's going to be more communication, and there's going to be more feedback, and it's got to continue. Because having that clearly defined channels of communication for people that feel like they're not getting what they need out of the program, making sure that you're open to that feedback, and providing either surveys or email that goes to your team, different ways so that people feel engaged and can continue to communicate to you is going to be a big part of that success. Yes, Daniel, I agree entirely. It has to be from the top down and the bottom up. Everybody has to buy in to be successful with this because it takes everybody doing it to actually achieve this goal. But that's true of the entire organization and the entire company in whatever industry you're in. It takes everybody buying into what their role is and what they're doing. And this just has to become a part of their lives and understanding how they are impacting the company. So feedback is the other side of communication, right? You can easily send out communication, but if you're not hearing anything back from people, you're also losing them. So whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's questions or suggestions, all of that is valuable. Once you start to actively work on your learning culture, you're going to want to continue to treat it like a growing organism. It's something that you feed. It's something that you nurture. Think of it. I don't know. A good example might be a bonsai tree. You continue to tweak and prune it, and it turns into this beautiful, living piece of art. So, and the only way you can do that is by continually getting feedback and working with that feedback. And this is from both the stakeholders and employees, because just like with our goals, stakeholders, the organization goals or vision or leadership might change. So you're going to want to continue to hear feedback from them and see how your initiatives are impacting them, and you may have to adjust because of that. So Daniel says, feedback always needs a why, in my opinion. Understanding why they feel that way helps go beyond the knee-jerking reaction we may have when someone isn't thrilled. This, under being heard, this goes to sort of being heard, I think. So as much as feedback is to communicate something to you guys about your training or your learner experience or whatever it might be, sometimes it just helps somebody to be engaged, to be heard. You may not be able to fix that issue, but if it's something that's actionable, make sure that you can communicate back to them, how you're planning to address it, and how it can potentially improve the situation. you know like I was just saying, it makes people feel to be good to be heard. We operate at some level on our self-esteem. So if you can at least tell them that you understand what the issue is, and it may not be a response back to an individual, it might be to the whole group if this feedback is more than one person. But if you don't hear the feedback, or those people uh, don't feel like they were heard, it can very easily lower morale, and it can cause issues, and it can begin to fester. All right, so recognition and reward. What's this about? So things to think about when we're talking about recognition and reward and esteem. It's the same thing as being heard in a sense. Your learners, they have a certain amount of time in their lives that they can dedicate to work. In the United States, people are working upwards of 50 and 60 hours on a regular basis, and you're asking them to do something in addition to that. So, a small price to pay for that is figuring out ways that you can recognize them and have the organization show appreciation for what they're doing, even though really it is part of their job. And they may not see it that way, but we can't use that mentality, that expectation, because they have a job, they must do this, and then expect them to happily do it. That just generally doesn't work. And with a learning culture and training, you have the opportunity to make it a little more interesting and fun, whether it's the courses that you create or the tools that you use. You can make learning more interesting and more fun than other things. And you can also provide some kind of reward. And reward, doesn't have to be a monetary reward. You know, so this is a symbiotic relationship, right? This is, not going to work if somebody is not engaged or involved. And that's one of the biggest problems that's called out in the industry today, is that we have engagement issues. So there's different ways to address that. The tool, we'll talk about the learner experience in just a minute, but the tools that you have, the communication that you have, the recognition and or rewards that you provide, all of this is going to help there. So you need to make sure that all parts of the company are on board and in sync with each other so that they understand what's going on. You know, that article that Alan just posted, it's a great introduction to gamification and why it can be valuable and how it can help help your training processes. And understand that, gamification is very much just a tool. It all depends on how you use it and how you apply it and whether or not it'll be successful. So having the right level of communication and tools with that is going to greatly help. You know, Something that I personally saw work in my own career, because it happened to me. I was working for another company, and um, one of the rewards for participation in this event was that you had the opportunity to sit down and speak with somebody in leadership. I actually got to speak to the CEO. So, I mean, and it wasn't long. I think they only allotted me 30 minutes, but that was the first time I ever had the opportunity to speak with somebody in my career at a C level like that. And, it went very well. They were very open to hearing, what I had to say. And, I had questions and they did their best to answer them the way that they could. But it was a very interesting and enriching experience. And you can't always necessarily get your leadership to do this, and their time is extremely valuable, but it can be a great motivator and a great tool for an engagement. So it's something to consider. So we've been talking about how this can help improve morale. As part of that, though, because I've seen it work both ways, make sure that whatever you do is sincere. Make sure that they believe that you're genuinely grateful for them participating in this. Because I have seen this go both ways, where the culture had devolved instead of evolving into something. The culture had devolved in the sense that um, even though forms of recognition and praise and thanks were going out, the learner or employee population felt that it was very disingenuous. So, um, something to be very careful about to make sure that what you do is authentic. So before you put together your recognition and reward, talk to your employees. Figure out what it is that makes them feel rewarded. I've worked in quite a few different aspects of different companies in my career. I've been in QA, I've been a product manager, I've been a senior UX designer, I've been a solution consultant, a product evangelist, I've been in sales. Um, so I've been all over the place. And what I've learned in talking to people in those different groups that I worked in is they're very motivated by different things. You know, Most salespeople, not all, are very money driven, coin operated, if you will, to make a little joke there. Um, but I spend a lot of time working in an engineering department as well. And, although they desire enough money to make sure that their needs are met, at a certain point, quality of life or time off becomes much more valuable to them. So make sure that you understand what actually feels like a reward or recognition to somebody. You know, giving somebody, giving somebody a half a day off or a paid for a group of people that were high performers, a paid for lunch. These are things that don't necessarily cost the organization a lot of money financially, but it actually can foster a productive spirit of competition and raise morale for a group of people. There was a particular competition that we were in one time. We won, and a group of us. So it became a social experience as well. The I think it was the top 5 people each month is how it was done, but they made sure that it was not just one person winning. They made sure it was 5 people winning. And that way those 5 people were sent off to do the same event. And they got to choose where they wanted to go. And they got, I think it was you got half a day off to go do it. But it was really meaningful. And on top of that, it had the added benefit of creating a sense of camaraderie between people that you may not have normally interacted with. So that was actually a really interesting reward that I felt was extremely effective. So Kate says my leadership is advocating the stick for training for clients. So Kate, yeah, some management styles are going to go that direction, and you may not be able to turn that tide. You can definitely make the argument. There's a ton of data out there. There's a ton of research that suggests that the stick is far less effective than the carrot. But at a certain point, you're going to have to accept that if they're unwilling to look at different ways of doing things, trying to figure out the best way possible for you to operate within that culture. Um, sometimes sometimes you can't change it. But you can try, and I suggest you try because there would be a ton of reasons that it may not be as effective as they would like. Marta says apparently the millennials would appreciate as recognition some flexible working options. Yeah, bringing up millennials, they look at all of this very differently. They seem to, based on research and experience, be much more interested in quality of life. Just like my developer example, um, they at a certain point of financial recognition, other things become much more important to them. So understanding how that motivation affects these younger generations and how you're going to have to adapt to be able to compete is going to be very important. Um, and it's already come up a few times, but gamification and leaderboards are a great way to track this recognition and reward, right? So that people can clearly understand the rules of how scores are being applied, who's winning. Being able to see these things are very important to the process because you can also lose engagement and you can lose the focus of your learners if they don't feel like the process is fair. Now, I'm going to agree with Alan that autonomy motivates us much more than being forced to do something. If we're given a choice and a reason why, and some possibly some choices in how we can learn, we're going to be much more motivated to go ahead and do that. As opposed to just being told you must do this or else. The chances are is that they probably will get it done, but it will not be in the sense where they're getting the most out of it that they can, and they will probably wait until the last minute to do so. So you won't get the effectiveness and the desired result out of your culture in situations like that, or it could be less. All right, so I want to talk about the learning experience now because this is something that's extremely important to me, having spent many years as a product manager and spent many years as a usability designer, understanding what the experience is, from the learner perspective, because at the end of the day, they are the end customer of everything. They are the ones that have to take the courses. They're the ones that are, using these tools that you have to do this, whether the tool is a course that you've built or an LMS that you're using, figuring out the way to make the best experience possible. And by that, I mean, less anything that becomes an obstacle or frustrating, removing those, giving them options to learn when and where they want to. All of that can be extremely important in your overall strategy in their learning. All right, so why is this important? I already started talking about this, but I'm going to continue on here. What we've seen is that generally learners don't see the value in what they're doing, and that's part of the discussion that's been going on. And this is, a breakdown in communication. And this could be for many reasons. It may be that they didn't know, or they missed a communication, so they didn't get any reminders, or they don't understand how this 40 minutes out of their life, in their busy work week, actually impacts the bottom line of the organization very strongly. So, making sure they understand as part of their experience, having that right level of communication, removing obstacles to making things harder. So this is very much about tools. So making sure that you have the right tools to develop courses that are engaging and interesting and usable and easy to use, as well as the correct tools that allow you to easily deliver, train, and track everything that's going on, and has as much of these features built in as possible. And then finally, if, and I said this before, but if there are obstacles and if there are things that are frustrating, you've already lost engagement before they ever start taking the training. So making sure that they are communicated to, that they have the opportunity for feedback, that they can easily access your training, that your training is clear and usable, all are going to lend themselves to your overall success. So having been a usability designer, this is extremely important to me, and I can't explain human-computer interaction and usability in one slide or potentially even in 1 hour. But usability, broken down very simply, is how clear and intuitive whatever you're using or building is. So it has good design and layout. You know, it's easy to understand just looking at it where the different pieces of what tool there is necessary for me to complete the task at hand. Whether the task is accessing the course, or the task is actually taking the course, or in your case creating a report so that you can send it to your stakeholders. All of this has to be as easy as possible. Making sure that you have the right levels of visual communication. And for any of you that design and build your own courses, I mean, I'm sure many designers are very familiar with this. Making sure that the right communication is there visually, not just textually, but everything cohesively backs itself up. And then it has intuitive interaction design. And what I mean by that, the easiest way to describe intuitive interaction is most people can have they can have a conversation with somebody while they're texting somebody else. It's rude, but they can, because the design of that particular tool is so intuitive that it becomes second nature to them, and they can use it that easily. And those should really, in my opinion, those should be the goals, of the tools that you choose to purchase, to use, as well as the courses that you build, because this is going to have a big impact on the learners themselves and the experience of your learning culture, because this is their part of it. This is what they're contributing, is actually utilizing these tools and taking the courses. Uh, Lisa says, if you don't design with contrast, repetition, alignment, proximity, your designs look like crap. And that is very true. And I'm going to use this last quote. A friend of mine in an engineering department used to say this, and it was very true of developers, but it's true of designers as well. Why make things simple when we can make them complex and wonderful? And what that means to me is that many times When we could do something a much simpler, easier, commonly understood way, we tend to want to challenge ourselves as individuals and try to do something new and exciting and engaging for us, but may not be the best thing for the person who actually has to use that particular tool, take that course. So in all of this, part of good usability is simplicity. Keep it simple. I think in most occasions, from their perspective, it may be complex on the back end, but from the front end, when they're going through it, keep it as simple as possible while still being challenging as far as what they have to learn. So how does the learning experience impact learning? You know, we've been talking through this and you guys are having discussions about it, but if the tools are hard to use, you've already lost their attention. So making sure that you have the best tools possible is going to be a big help here. Clear visual communication and design, it's going to help them through the process. They know based on, I take this action, I get this back. So whether you're designing a course or you bought a tool, make sure that it clearly leads them through the process and they don't spend time having to try to figure out how to use what you've bought or built, and they can spend their time focusing on learning the material at hand. A big part of today's culture is mobile. So we're all on our cell phones, we're all on our tablets. So make sure that what you're designing and building can be accessed that way. So if you have an LMS, make sure that the training that you buy or build is deliverable through a mobile device, because not everybody is sitting at a desk, or when they have time to do something, they may be away from there. So giving people access, and also if we want to go back and refer to the example of millennials, they've grown up like this. This is their expectation. Many of us have been around long enough where smartphones didn't exist, and um, in some of our cases, the internet didn't exist. So, but we have to be aware that younger generations are very much expecting things to go this way. So we need to prepare for it and making sure that that's part of your plan. I'm going to hammer this point home as well. No, actually, Alan, I was referring to myself. I have also been around since before the days of the internet, and most certainly before the days of the smartphone. I uh, I was in college when the internet came around, what feels like quite a long time ago. So I do remember the days of no internet and no cell phones even, and having to be home before the street lights turned on. So uh, times change, and so we have to change with them. The last thing I want to talk to you guys about, and then we can open this up to as many questions as you have. So we've talked about all these things. I just wanted to give you a example of a tool, from Adobe that I feel meets a lot of this, and that's Adobe Captivate Prime. This is our new LMS. It offers a stimulating learner experience. It's easy to manage. It has gamification and badging built in, and it's a great tool to build a learning culture around. And some of the reasons for that are that our fluidic player, it's a player, requires no plugins. It easily allows you to take all of your learning content of different types and fluidly, if you will, stream them together in one player. For those of you that have never managed an LMS, it's extremely easy to manage and use. It has a very easy to understand leaderboard built in so that when you're looking to show your learners, how you're planning to recognize and reward them, whether it's through gamification or badging, it's all built in and easy to use. And it supplies a native mobile app, which has the same experience for the learner no matter where they're at. Plus, it has a great, easy, low monthly payment per learner. So that's everything that I had prepared on this subject today. So now I can spend more time looking at the discussion pod and any other questions that come up. I'm going to try to look at these now. So get your questions up top. I will also be looking at the discussion pod. Um, Esmeralda says, I see this on a regular basis. Training is done when there is a business need to fill. I don't think that most employers are very interested in developing employees' hidden talents and skills as a way of connecting to value or mission of the organization. Esmeralda, I would say that that has very commonly been a way of thinking. I believe very much that that's changing though. And that's part of your job to create that plan and create that learning culture and sell that to your organization. Whether it's Deloitte or Burson or ATD or there's a ton of different groups out there, and there's a ton of research to be had that will support your desire to change that perspective within your organization. It's definitely not something that normally happens overnight, and this is where building up champions comes into play. Lisa says, how effective are the characters scenarios? Do stakeholders, learners view them as cheesy or useful? Um, I would say that depends on a little bit on your organization and a little bit on your course design. Um, I actually personally like them. I don't think that they're cheesy per se, but I'm a visual person, so I prefer in what I'm doing to be able to have some visuals with what I'm learning, and making sure that those are tied together. So I find that that's really more effective for some, but I think it also could very much depend on the learner themselves. Raquel has a question. I know Captivate and love it, but my company is using SuccessFactors and not Captivate Prime. Do you still feel it is easy to upload modules even if the respective LMS is not being utilized? Depending on your organization's needs, you may not be able to change the LMS that they're using. I feel that Prime is a great option for those that are looking for a new LMS or need to change their LMS for various reasons. Um, Sometimes that's not necessarily going to be your call, and you're going to have to work within the bounds of what your organization has. As Alan said, Prime actually works well with most of the major published standards, as well as just about any file type. Not all of them, but just about any. One of the big advantages, and the first time I saw Captivate Prime was just about at its time of release, and I'm at my 1 year anniversary with Adobe, so both things happened just about at the same time. Um, the fluidic player is really something that's fantastic. Most of the time in most LMS, when you launch a Word document, it launches the Word document. When you launch a PowerPoint, it launches the PowerPoint. When you launch a SCORM course, it launches a SCORM player. And video, it launches a video player. The great thing about the fluidic player is it takes all of these different types of formats and puts them into a single player in a experience that is very easy to go through, that also has bookmarking and note taking right there. So it's a really nice experience for the learner. Let's see what's happening in the discussion pod here. Oh, looks like we have one more question. James, how can we save a copy of the chat for the webinars, please and thank you. I believe Control A will select all from the chat pod, so that you can go ahead and do that. Alan has put his email into the discussion pod, and I'll add mine as well for those that would like to reach out to us. Also, if you're interested in seeing more about Captivate Prime, there is an easy to click link down here at the bottom next to the discussion pod. So, that being said, are there any more questions, or just trying to follow the discussion here? It looks like we're talking about different types of tools and the different formats that they can produce. Gwen says, how often do you recommend updating your learning business plan? And then she asks, annually. I would say that it is probably a good idea to look at it at least annually, not necessarily to change it, but to look at the feedback that you're getting over the course of a year or over the course of 6 months. Um, Hopefully, all you'll have to be doing is certain tweaks and minor changes. If you find that something is definitely not working, um, I would create an action plan and build out a timeline and discuss that with your stakeholders, and figure out the immediacy of that need and how quickly it needs to be changed, and make sure that you have vertical alignment from the top to you first, and then be ready to communicate that to your learners if it's going to have an impact on them. So if there are no more questions, I want to thank all of you for showing up today. I hope that you find this valuable. You'll be able to get a copy of the presentation as well as the recording. Jane, you raised your hand. Did you want to put a question in the Q&A pod, or were you looking? Did you pose a question in the discussion pod that I missed? Yes, thank you very much, Alan, for participating in the discussion pod. It's always a pleasure, and I'm always very grateful to have you here. Alan, if you don't know him, he is an amazing wealth of knowledge, and it's always great to have him during a presentation. So thank you. All right, with that, thank you everybody. Have a wonderful afternoon, and have a great weekend. And hopefully I'll be speaking to some of you again